Okay, I've just attended Meta's Online Marketing Summit for 2024. If you are not aware of what it is, it's essentially Meta's yearly event focused on its various products, but this one specifically is very much focused on their ads platform as a business. And that makes a lot of sense since their whole business model does rely on advertisers to spend money on their platform, and that's where most of their revenue and probably profit comes from. If you're interested in watching some of the videos that they did, there is on-demand content available, and I will link the website to that in the description box below. I'd recommend you watching. But this video here is more of a summary of some of the elements that they spoke about, where they're heading in terms of their ads platform, whether that's touch points on machine learning, creative optimization, how to collaborate with artificial intelligence, or even their perspectives in terms of the relationship between Meta and their partners, whether that's external agencies or direct to clients or directly in partnership with brands, and how they're essentially focusing on that this year. And without further ado, there is a lot to talk about, so I'll breeze through some of these points. Let's begin. I do have a bit of a cold, so if I do sound a bit nasally, apologies in advance. But right, let's start with AI. One of the first video I watched on the website that is linked below is essentially how advertisers will collaborate more with AI, whether that's ChatGPT, Claude, or even Meta's own AI tool called Llama 2 or Llama 3 at this point. But Meta emphasizes the way they approach testing the collaboration between a human and AI is through using AI as a way to create different personas or different perspectives for a specific use case. And in this instance, when we talk about marketing, we know that there are different roles within marketing, whether that's you're more on the creative side, you might be more in the visuals or the messaging, you might be more so on potentially forecasting budgets, you might be more so on giving critical feedback on a specific campaign or a specific approach to brand messaging. Meta does recommend seeing AI as an extension of different personalities and using those different personalities or different roles as a way to improve your approach to marketing. It's good to say that as a marketer, you can do everything, but that isn't usually the case. We specialize in a few different channels, and having an AI or another digital persona to give you feedback on an area you're not quite good at has a lot of value. So a quick visual example of that. In this video, the project use case was someone writing a book, and they created an AI personality or character that would be essentially a type of person who's maybe a professor that does give critical feedback. They were essentially using a digital persona to give critical feedback on the book. That feedback loop mechanism, it helps neutralize your output as a marketer or a creative, right? When we create, we're very biased, we're very linear in our ways of thinking, and having AI almost challenge you in that process makes your overall creation a lot better. So that's all things AI. Second point I have here in my notes is that Meta predicts that by the year 2030, 45% of the global economy's marketing will be done by AI. Now that's a very big statement, but I think the lesson there is that marketers will rely more on automation and AI for their output. I made another point here where I think a lot of the value of a marketer isn't necessarily in setting up campaigns or setting up audience targeting or creative optimization. The performance marketer within Meta Ads specifically, having an understanding of business context, external variables, plus extracting insights from Meta Ads, that's where the real value is in the future, right? And if you're a standard paid social specialist, value isn't in setting up campaigns anymore. You've got business context, you can optimize the campaign upon that, and you can extract insights both from the Meta Ads platform and from your external database or your BI tool of choice, and essentially improve the campaign from that point of view. Next point I have here is AI, artificial intelligence, where Meta essentially says, previously, there was a lot of manual management of Facebook ads campaign, from campaign optimization to choosing specific Facebook or Instagram placements to creatives, whether that's the actual image or video, carousel, or even the ad copy, and especially audience targeting. Whereas now that's shifting into a more automated way of managing a campaign, right? We know that Advantage Shopping Campaign Plus almost gets rid of all the manual and tedious process that happens And so we rely more on automation or machine learning to improve our performance. So part of that includes the fact that there will probably be a lot of updates within the Meta Ads platform. I would say more so in terms of advantage shopping campaign. The ASC type of campaign was really designed for e-commerce brands, right? You can only optimize towards a purchase. Whereas now, so personally speaking with a Meta rep, I know that Meta will launch ASC for non-purchase events. You could be an app-based company or a lead generation company. So now you can optimize towards an app install, lead generation. Meta is now trying to essentially take the AI automation approach for more types of businesses rather than just e-commerce. So there'll be lots of changes in terms of ASC, but as well as user interface updates, probably more in the visual aspects. I know personally, it seems like every 1 to 2 months, there is always some sort of a change in terms of campaign creation, some of the metrics you can see. So that will carry on this year. The main insight from the point that I've just made is learn the fundamentals of Meta Ads as a platform. There'll be lots of changes happening in terms of UI and features, but remember that we are using Facebook not for its features, but because of the results it can give your business or the brand you're working with. All these features are great, but how does it actually improve our KPIs or our key performance indicators? Basically, the lesson is don't get too caught up with all these changes happening within the platform beyond Facebook ads, right? For every other platform or software that you're using for marketing. So another point I've made here, which is quite interesting. So the term performance marketing was used quite a lot throughout this Meta's online marketing summit. And it's interesting, performance marketing, even 3-4 years ago, that was a term that wasn't used as often as it is now. And I know that from contracting, from employment, and looking at a lot of job descriptions and even pitching to clients. Now it seems like there's a trend of a lot of companies, even Meta, using the term performance marketing, which we can do another video on what performance marketing really is. But at a top line level, it's a marketer who uses paid advertising platforms to improve metrics or improve performance. I just thought it was interesting. There's even a video on there that mentions about the difference between a brand performance marketer and a direct response performance marketer. And I think that's interesting how now the term performance marketing is now being segmented into the different parts of marketing, right? Brand awareness versus direct response, and how they can potentially collaborate. So that's interesting. Next point here is the Power of 5. I think it's called the Power of 5. Essentially is best practice framework or approach when you're using Facebook ads or Meta ads. And that is, number one is account simplification. So fewer campaigns, fewer ad sets, essentially relying more on automation to improve performance over a period of time. When you have fewer campaigns, there's less fragmentation in your budgets. At the same time, you'll exit the learning phase a lot faster. Second is automation, very much related to the previous point, more so on audience targeting and placements. So rather than you manually targeting specific segments of audiences or Facebook or Instagram placements, it's essentially ticking all the boxes, going broad, and relying on the algorithm to improve your performance. Number 3 is creative diversification. They do mention this term quite a lot, which is interesting, and I understand why, because paid social or Meta ad specifically, it's such a visual marketing channel where essentially you're trying to interrupt someone's pattern, right? When someone goes on Facebook, they're not there to buy a product, right? They're there to see updates from their family, friends, network, or even media publishers that they follow. So there's a bit more friction as opposed to paid search where it's more intent driven as a marketing channel. Creative diversification is essentially making sure that you have a good amount of creatives within your campaign, and it's personalized to obviously your ICP or ideal customer persona or ideal customer profile to avoid creative ad fatigue, right? If it's a small audience you're targeting and that same person sees the same exact ad over a week, let's say they see the ad more than 20 times in a week, once you get creative fatigue, even though that's not a metric you'll always see within Meta ads, you'll start to see your cost per mils increase, right? There's a negative connotation to ad frequency. Again, focusing back to the Power of 5. Fourth point here is data quality. Now, this is very important. This is essentially saying, okay, we're going away from cookie-based targeting. We're now using conversion API, i.e. server-side tracking. You're now using your internal database as a company to push out data back to Meta. What's the event match quality score? How accurate is it? So the data that you get from your database and using your conversion API as a bridge between your business data and your Facebook data, what's the accuracy between that process, between that funnel? The conclusion there is making sure that your data is as accurate as possible from point A to point B in this instance. You can take a look at a platform like Segment to push out some of those parameters so you can get a bit more accurate data. If you're interested in learning more about that, leave a comment below. I can potentially do a video on that separately. Closing off with the power of 5, point number 5 is essentially being able to gain results and validate those results, right? What that means is using the data to understand and measure your performance through incrementality. And as a marketer, really that's what you're doing, right? You're trying to figure out which channels are the most effective and why are they the most effective? Are they effective in terms of the volume of customers we get? Is it effective in terms of or return on ad spend? Is it effective in terms of conversion rates from traffic to becoming a lead? Let's say if you're a B2B company, and essentially understanding that if we have an extra £1 million or $1 million to spend, how would we allocate that spend across Meta, paid search, programmatic display, out-of-home advertising, and what's the potential incrementality or lift that we can get from deploying these budgets? So there's a lot to unpack there, but some of the ways you can do that within Meta is obviously a conversion lift study. There's also another feature called search lift study, where you can only really deploy that if you have a dedicated Meta rep to help you set that up. But essentially, we know that paid social platforms is great for brand awareness and probably great for a first touch point if you're a new brand. But a lot of those users, they click through your ad, they see your ad, but they probably search for you organically post, so they might search for your brand within Google search, for example, and what happens is they might convert through Google or Microsoft search. Unfortunately, Google and Microsoft will take those attributions, and when we know in reality that actually they came from YouTube or they came from Meta. So Meta's search lift study specifically gives you an idea of what that incrementality is. How does your Meta ads traffic, or how does your Meta ads campaign affect your paid search channels in this instance? So that's power 5. Let's breeze through some of these other points here. Going back to incrementality, start to take a look at marketing mix modeling, brand lift studies, conversion lift studies, and search lift studies, essentially to see the incrementality of increasing spends and even launching campaigns in Meta, because you need to understand how Meta affects your other channels. We're thinking in ecosystems as a marketer. There's another interesting point here in terms of creatives. So one of the partners that Meta works with is a company called Celtra. I think they are a creative agency that works a lot on creative automation. They work with a lot of e-commerce brands, essentially helping them create more dynamic creatives with product catalogs, right? So these are the type of ads where it's a bit more dynamic. If you viewed product category A, those are the type of ads that you'll see. It's interesting that the event does talk about creatives a lot. I find that, your creative teams, your performance marketers, and even maybe your product teams somehow misaligned, and there's not really a lot of cadence in terms of knowledge sharing. So that's maybe something you watching might want to start implementing within your specific use case. And then just to close off on creatives, the event also talks about the importance of having creatives that are personalized, that's dynamic. There's a sense of diversification in terms of static images, carousels, user-generated content, ad copy, as well as placements, right? So as obvious as it may sound, make sure that your creatives works really well for that specific placement. So if it's a Facebook feed placement, make sure that preferably it's a 1:1 ratio creative, and don't use the same exact 1:1 creative for Instagram Reels or Instagram Stories, because in theory it won't be expanded, right? It will just be squared image or video, and then it's just a black box above the creatives, which doesn't make sense, right? You want to utilize that space. And then to close off, it does sound like Meta does really want to start collaborating with agencies, partners, and brands directly. And that makes a lot of sense because, as mentioned earlier in the video, Meta as a business relies on advertisers spending money within their platform. So now I feel like there's more of a focus on building a relationship with their clients, essentially us marketers and advertisers. Even with TikTok, they're partnering with clients. They have these programs to help brands improve their performance. I'm confident that's a trend that's going to happen with a lot more advertising platforms, where the relationship between brand or agency with that specific platform will become more solidified. So there's going to be more of a collaboration aspect to it. So that's the end of the video. Hopefully you've learned a thing or two. If you have enjoyed the video, please do subscribe. Up until next time, peace.